This is the lens that everybody tells you to buy for your landscape photography that you shouldn't. And in this video, I'm gonna be telling you which lens that you need to get instead that's gonna save you $1,000. Hey, what's up everybody? My name's David Johnston, and this is the Landscape Photography University channel where we help you take photos that you're actually excited about. So if you're into that, you wanna improve your photography, click the subscribe button below and the notification bell so that you can do just that. Let's get into this lens. What is it exactly? Now, in landscape photography, there are basically two kinds of lenses that you use for the classic landscape photography shots. Number one is the wide angle lens, which makes everything look really big and elongated both on the top, bottom, and the right and the left. Then you have shots that involve a telephoto lens. The telephoto lens compresses distances instead of elongating distances like the wide angle lens does. This one in particular, because it's for landscape photography, is a 70-200 lens. Now, every camera makes a 70-200 lens, whether you're Canon, Nikon, Sony, Fuji, whatever. I happen to be shooting a Sony today, so I'm having here with me the Sony G Master 70-200 f2.8 lens. Now, why should you not get this lens? Well, number one, it's pretty expensive and not everybody can afford it. I checked this morning online and it was about $2,700 to buy this lens right here. Now, I know a lot of you may be saying right now, hey, I know a lot of landscape photographers who use a 70-200 lens. Absolutely they do. Let me explain the differences between this lens and the lens that you should buy. So at this point, you may be saying, okay, Dave, enough with the teasing, let's get to it. You've talked about the 70-200 f2.8. What's the one you actually want us to buy and why? So let's first look what that lens actually is. This is 70-200, but it's an f4 version. And you may be thinking they're pretty close, but they're actually very far away, especially with the price point that I mentioned. I know you may be thinking that I said I shoot with a Sony, so maybe not every camera make has an f2.8 and an f4 version. They're actually pretty standard across all camera makes. I checked this morning, basically Canon, Sony, Fuji, and Nikon, plus many more, make a f2.8 version of the 70-200 and an f4 version of the 70-200. Now, let's look at the comparisons here. Obviously, this is a little bit older of a model. This is the f4 version that I have in my left hand connected to the camera. And then on your left, in my right hand, I have the 70-200 f2.8 that is not connected to the camera. Both are about the same weight. Even though the f4 is attached to my camera, the f2.8 is much heavier. Now, why is that? Well, the f2.8 actually has much more glass inside of it that allows it to make more blurry backgrounds when you're at its widest at f2.8. That's really beneficial for a lot of photographers, but not really landscape photographers, which is why I don't recommend this lens. Now, you may be saying there's sacrifice between the material that it's actually made out of, internal versus external zoom. They are made of the exact same material and both use internal zoom, which means that as you zoom, they actually stay inside of the barrel of the lens, which is really handy when it comes to weather sealing and protection against the elements. So what is the main difference here? Since they're so similar, why would somebody get the f2.8 that's $1,000 more versus the f4, which is just as durable, just as good as the other lens? Let me show you and let's compare the two side by side with some photos. So all around me, you can see I'm surrounded by some beautiful trees, as well as some tremendous oaks, as well as some blood-sucking mosquitoes that are about to eat me alive. Now, let's look at how these two perform side by side. I'm gonna go through several different shots so that you can see how the aperture changes, since that's pretty much the only variable distinguishing these two apart. So let's go with the f4 first. First, I'm gonna use the f4 at f16, then f8, and then all the way down at its widest at f4. Now I'm gonna be taking some photos of just some oak leaves that are secluded against the background so that you can compare compression as well as how much blurring effect or bokeh that puts behind these leaves. So the first shot that I'm gonna take is at f16. So I'm gonna adjust my aperture all the way up to f16. I'm gonna elongate the old shutter speed here and increase the ISO so that I can get enough light. And I'll do the same settings with each lens so that you guys can see the differences. So next I'm gonna keep the same camera settings and I'm just gonna attach the f2.8 lens all the way zoomed in at 200 millimeters so that we keep everything exact for this test. So you can see there's no differences here, and I'm not editing these or anything like that. So you can see that they're very similar in the two lenses. I would be hard pressed to tell any differences whatsoever. Next, let's go down to f8 with the f4 lens. So I'm gonna put this one down. I'm gonna bring out the f4 lens, connect it, and I'm gonna drop my aperture down to f8, speed up my shutter speed a little bit, and let's go. So you can see that with a wider aperture, there's more blurring behind these oak leaves, but let's go with the 2.8 and see if there's any real difference here. Got the 2.8 on, gonna attach it with the exact same camera settings. And there we go. So you can see with these two photos side by side, there's really still no difference whatsoever. Now let's go as wide as possible with the f4. There you have it. So really still no huge differences here between the f4 and the f2.8. Let's see it as wide as possible at the f2.8 mark. Same settings, attach the 2.8. No real noticeable difference between these two photos. Honestly, I would be hard pressed to tell which one is which. You can see a little bit more blurring with the f2.8 in the background just because of that wider aperture. So we've done the testing with these two lenses and we can see that there's no real huge difference here. When you're a landscape photographer, the reason I highly recommend the f4 is because landscape photographers rarely go wider than f8, especially when we're looking for that compression with our telephoto shots, something like a 70 to 200. Now, that's why I go with the f4. Exact same results, exact same materials made, the durability, the quality, but it's $1,000 cheaper and a little bit more lightweight than the f2.8 is. And anytime you get lighter weight in your camera bag, that's a good thing. So who would actually want to buy the f2.8 version of the 70 to 200, no matter what camera that you're using? Sony, Canon, Fuji, Nikon, any of those. The reason these are in the market is just because a lot of wedding photographers, portrait photographers, sports photographers love the f2.8 version just because of that a little bit amount more blurring that's in the background of the photos. Totally get that, and that's why there's a market for this lens. But just because the f2.8 is $1,000 more, don't think that it's a higher quality than the f4, because you're gonna get the same quality of photos out of this. You're just saving a lot more money and putting less weight in your bag. That's why all landscape photographers need the f4 in their bag instead of the 2.8. If you want more photography videos that are gonna help you out, probably save you some money and time too, go ahead and click this playlist right here.